Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is George Kriza, CEO of Challenging Decisions. Today we have a very knowledgeable and interesting guest for our video podcast, and that's Margaret Graziano. Margaret and I have known each other for over 20 years. Margaret operates a business designed to maximize corporate performance and do that in various different ways, including culture. And that'll be our main topic today, but we'd like to welcome Margaret. So say hello, Margaret.
Hi, George, and all the guests. Glad to be here.
All right, sounds good. I thought what would be nice, though, is before we get into the meat of the discussion, maybe you could give us a little bit of your career path and how you got here. I know we met 20 years ago. You were operating your organization out of Rolling Meadows, Illinois. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And it's been maybe a bit of the long and winding road to get here. So we'd love to hear about it.
So I started my career in recruiting. And when I met George, we were both members of something called Tech, which is now Vistage. And I was running a search and a staffing company. And somewhere around 2008, I decided it was time to do something for me that was more meaningful. And I sold that business and I transitioned to organizational culture. Along the journey, as I was running the staffing and recruiting company, I also took organizational development classes. I went back to DePaul and I got a certification in organizational development, specifically in diagnosis, how to find out if something's wrong with an organization or where it's wrong or what is the root cause. And then I went into behavioral psychometrics and then a whole host of a decade of work in the human potential movement. So the company now, Keen Alignment, is an intersection between organizational effectiveness and human potential. And it really is what we do is we work with leadership teams to optimize the people on the team, remove constraints so they can accomplish their goals.
Sounds terrific. And that's without a doubt a very, very important part of business success today. And I'd like to maybe start the discussion by asking you what seems to me kind of an obvious question, but maybe it's not so obvious. Who would you say owns the culture in an organization? Does anyone own the culture?
Well, everyone owns the culture, and it has to be time dedicated by the CEO. There needs to be attention, not just I own culture, but what are you doing this week for culture? Where are you removing obstacles? What initiatives are happening that will move culture forward? But ultimately, it all begins at the top. And whenever there's problems in the culture, you have to go and see where the root causes are. And it's almost always on the executive team. It's something that's going on the executive team that either they're stepping over or that they don't know and they don't know that they don't know it, or that things have gotten out of control. The company's grown too fast or whatever. You never know exactly. But it's the C-suite and it's the CEO.
I would agree with that completely. Now, one of the things that our audience may not be aware of is that you also worked with our organization, my prior company, MTC Performance. And, this was a topic that we worked a lot on. But I always felt, and I hope it showed through to you, I always felt like I did own the culture, and I had to set the tone for the culture in the organization. And if I never did that, to your point, if I did not set the tone, how could I expect everyone else in the organization to buy into the direction that we're trying to go in the organization and the behavioral dynamics that we want to manifest between one another? Those two things are so clearly essential and interwoven, exactly as you described. So anyway, I did my best to do it. In my path, one of the things that I did quite extensively for a period of about 15 years was try to implement the Patrick Lencioni disciplines for obsessions of an extraordinary executive and also 5 temptations of a CEO. And I found that those things were very, very essential. I think they're going to be harmonious with the mantras that you bring to the table in terms of putting an organization in the right posture. But so since we're talking about culture, what is the relationship between culture and success of a company?
Well, you can have a great strategy, but if the strategy is failing or has hiccups or is paused, it's when culture and strategy compete, culture always wins. So it's the strategy that tells you where you want to go, and it's the culture that has it happen. And so if things aren't happening, if people aren't taking ownership, if the ball's not moving down the field, it's a culture issue. If people aren't getting along, if people are not performing, and somebody's not addressing that lack of performance, that's a culture issue. If two people on the executive team can't seem to agree and they can't get out of each other's way to make the strategy happen, that's a culture issue. So culture is the air that moves strategy forward, or culture's the fuel for the strategy.
And that culture can either be functional or dysfunctional, as I think you're indicating. And we see dysfunction manifest in lots of different ways and in lots of different places. And would you say that not only the CEO, but the senior management team of an organization is also the cornerstone of pushing that positive culture down into the organization?
Yeah, George. So so let's back up a little bit. So you said culture can be functional or dysfunctional. So a high performance, intentional, healthy culture that your Patrick Lencioni, my Patrick Lencioni, all of our Patrick Lencioni talks about in his strategy book called The Advantage, which is by far one of the best books. It is far better than Traction, but it really talks about strategic framework and how do you have a smart culture and a healthy culture at the same time? How do you have a smart and a healthy company? Well, there's 4 elements to have a functional culture. First of all, it has to be achievement oriented. It isn't about how hard you work. It's not about how heavy you lift. It's about the results of what you're doing. Achievement, not effort. And this is really confused by a lot of employees. And we, in our Work Liberated podcast, we really appeal to both the corporate side of the business and the employee side of the business. So achievement is not about effort. Achievement is about results. Secondly, it's humanistic. Like, I get that there's people running my business and that people have needs. Some want this and some want that, and everybody listens in a different way. And in order for me to have a humanistic culture, I have to appreciate and understand people learn differently, they hear differently, they lead differently, and we have to understand that. Third is affiliative, which is like what we would call collaborative or innovative. It's people want to work with other people. People want to be in a network. And for those people, I was just listening to a report that the people who have failure in companies, they don't integrate. They don't integrate with the team. They don't make themselves valuable. So it's that affiliation. How can I help you? How can you help me? How can we work together to accomplish the bigger objective? And then finally, it's the self-actualization piece. With so many jobs being available, at least now until the big layoffs start happening, which are coming, we're hearing about them everywhere. And I even know people who are part of laying thousands of people off. Anyhow, the self-actualization is you could have a job and you could work for a paycheck, or you can have a job that you believe you are doing something noble. You believe the company is doing something that matters and that makes a difference and that makes the world a better place. There's a contribution all people want to have. If people on the team feel self-actualized in the organization and working on their projects, they will do better